The mahogany doors of the conference room slammed in my face with a decisive thud. Through the frosted glass, I could see the shadows of my stepchildren taking their seats around the polished table. Gold diggers aren't welcome here. Bradley had sneered before shutting me out. This is for real family only. I stood in the hallway of Pemberton and Associates, adjusting my black dress and trying to maintain my composure. 10 days since Thomas's funeral, and his children were already showing their true colors. Mrs. Mitchell? I turned to find James Pemberton, the family lawyer, standing beside me with a bemused expression and 2 cups of coffee. Mr. Pemberton? Shouldn't you be inside conducting the will reading? He smiled, a curious twinkle in his eye. Oh, they have a will to read. Just not the right one. I thought you might need this. He handed me the coffee. Shall we do the real will reading at your office now? My office? I blinked in confusion. I don't understand. You will. My car is outside. Trust me, Lydia. Your husband was many things, but naive wasn't one of them. As we walked past the conference room, I could hear Bradley's voice booming. Finally, we can get what we deserve without that woman's interference. 20 minutes later, I sat in my small real estate office, the one Thomas had encouraged me to open 5 years ago, staring at James Pemberton in shock. The will they're reading is fake? I repeated. Not fake, James corrected, pulling documents from his briefcase. Outdated. It's Thomas's will from 15 years ago, before he met you. Perfectly legal, properly witnessed. It leaves everything divided among his 3 children. But then, your husband came to me 6 months ago with a very specific request. He suspected his children would try something like this. He'd overheard them planning to contest any will that included you. So we crafted a plan. James spread out the documents. The real will, his final will, was executed 3 months ago. But Thomas instructed me to let his children find the old will in his home safe. He wanted them to show their true colors. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. He knew they would lock me out. He suspected. Bradley had been dropping hints about protecting family assets and gold diggers for months. Miranda had been researching how to contest wills. And Chloe, well, she'd been openly hostile since your wedding. I remembered. The wedding 4 years ago where Chloe had accidentally spilled red wine on my dress. Where Bradley gave a toast about temporary additions to permanent families. Where Miranda had told everyone I was just the nurse who'd gotten lucky. What does the real will say? I asked quietly. James opened the document. Thomas left his 3 children exactly what they deserve. $1 each, with a detailed explanation of why. The rest of his estate, valued at approximately $18 million, goes to you. The room spun. 18 million? But Thomas lived so modestly. By choice. He built his construction company from nothing and invested wisely. He lived simply because he wanted to, not because he had to. James adjusted his glasses. There's also a letter for you. With shaking hands, I opened Thomas's letter. My dearest Lydia, if you're reading this with James, then my children have done exactly what I feared. They've shown you who they really are. You never knew my net worth because you never asked. You fell in love with a widowed construction worker with calloused hands and a bad back. You spent your evenings rubbing those calloused hands and making me ice packs for that back. You encouraged me to pursue physical therapy, to take care of myself, to believe I deserved love again. My children called you a gold digger, but you're the one who insisted on signing a prenup to prove you wanted nothing. You're the one who continued working as a hospice nurse, coming home exhausted from 12-hour shifts to care for me too. You're the one who sold your own condo to pay for experimental treatments when I was diagnosed with cancer, not knowing I could have paid for them 100 times over. Bradley, Miranda, and Chloe haven't visited in years except to ask for money. They didn't come to my chemo appointments. You held my hand through every one. They didn't help when I was recovering from surgery. You slept in that uncomfortable hospital chair for weeks. They weren't there for the daily battles. You fought them all beside me. So let them have their moment of triumph with the old will. Let them show their greed. Then let James show you what you truly deserve, everything. The money is yours, but more importantly, I hope it gives you the freedom to live as generously as you loved me. Open that hospice center you've dreamed about. Take care of other families the way you took care of ours. And know that every moment with you was worth more than all the money in any bank. Forever your devoted husband. Thomas. I was crying so hard I could barely see. James tactfully handed me tissues and waited. There's more, he said gently. Security footage from Thomas's office building from last week. His children breaking into his office, searching for the will. Emails between them planning to lock you out. Bradley actually Googled how to hide assets from stepmother on his work computer. They planned all this while Thomas was dying? I'm afraid so. Thomas had a private investigator following them for months. He has recordings of them calling you horrible names, planning to contest any will that included you, even discussing how to have you removed from the house before the funeral. I thought about the last 6 months. How Bradley had suddenly started visiting, asking about his father's papers. How Miranda had volunteered to help with finances. How Chloe had suggested I was too emotional to handle funeral arrangements. What happens now? I asked. Now, James smiled, we wait. In approximately 2 hours, Bradley, Miranda, and Chloe will finish celebrating their inheritance. They'll probably go straight to the house, your house, to start inventory. That's when they'll be served with notices about the real will, along with eviction papers. Thomas made sure the house was transferred to you months ago. But they'll contest it. They'll drag this through court. They'll try. But Thomas was thorough. Medical records showing he was of sound mind. Videos of him explaining his decision. Proof of their neglect and greed. They won't win. James paused. There's also the matter of the fraud charges. Fraud. Bradley has been embezzling from Thomas's company for 3 years. Thomas knew but didn't press charges, hoping his son would come clean. That clemency ends with Thomas's death. Miranda has been claiming Thomas as a dependent on her taxes while never contributing to his care. Chloe has been using a company credit card for personal expenses. Thomas documented everything. I sank back in my chair. He knew all of this? He loved his children, Lydia. But love doesn't mean enabling terrible behavior. He hoped they would change, would show some genuine care. Instead, they proved him right about their character. My phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. Hope you enjoyed your little performance at the funeral. Time to move on. We're changing the locks tomorrow. James saw my face. Let me guess, they're already making plans? Changing the locks. Perfect. More evidence of their intent to illegally evict you. He made a note. Oh, I should mention, Thomas left letters for each of his children too. To be delivered after they realized the truth. 2 hours later, my phone exploded with calls. I didn't answer. James had advised me to let them go to voicemail, to document their threats. You conniving witch. Bradley's message screamed. We know what you did. You manipulated a sick old man. This isn't over. Miranda screeched. We'll prove you forced him to change the will. Chloe's was the most venomous. You killed him. The stress of you being in his life killed him. We'll make sure everyone knows what you are. But Thomas hadn't died from stress. He'd died peacefully in his sleep, holding my hand, after telling me he'd had the happiest 4 years of his life. The next day, the calls shifted from threats to bargaining. Lydia, let's be reasonable, Bradley tried, his voice suddenly silky. Dad wouldn't want us fighting. How about we split everything? 60-40. Lydia, sweetie, Miranda cooed. We're family. Surely we can work this out without lawyers. Chloe just cried and said she was sorry, that grief had made her act crazy. James had warned me about this too. The stages of grief when money is involved: denial, anger, bargaining, manipulation, and finally legal action. Sure enough, within a week, I was served with papers contesting the will. Their claim? I had unduly influenced Thomas, isolated him from his family, and manipulated him into changing his will. The court date was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, Thomas's children launched a social media campaign against me. They posted old photos of their loving family before I destroyed it. They gave interviews to anyone who would listen about the evil stepmother who stole their inheritance. What they didn't know was that Thomas had anticipated this too. James released a statement, along with security footage. Bradley stealing from the company. Miranda's tax fraud. Chloe's credit card abuse. And most damningly, a video from 2 years ago of all three telling Thomas they didn't need him since they had their own lives, recorded during what was supposed to be his 70th birthday dinner. They'd forgotten he existed until he got sick. The tide of public opinion turned overnight. But the real bombshell came during the court hearing. Your Honor, James announced, we'd like to submit new evidence. A recording from the supposed will reading at my office. The court watched as Bradley, Miranda, and Chloe celebrated their father's death, literally toasting to their inheritance while calling me names I won't repeat. Bradley actually said, the old fool finally did something right, dying before he could waste it all on that witch. Their lawyer visibly deflated. But James wasn't done. We also have this. He played a video of Thomas, clearly healthy and alert, sitting in James's office. I, Thomas Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, want to explain my decision. My children haven't visited me in 2 years except to ask for money. They didn't come to my wedding. They didn't help during my cancer treatment. They told me I was an embarrassment for marrying a younger woman, though Lydia is only 12 years younger, hardly scandalous. Lydia doesn't know I'm wealthy. She loves me for me. She's never asked for anything except my time and my heart. She deserves everything I have to give. My children deserve exactly what they gave me in my final years. Nothing. Though I'll leave them each $1 so they can't claim I forgot them. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The will stood. The fraud charges would be prosecuted. And a restraining order was granted against all 3 children for their threatening behavior. As we left the courthouse, Bradley cornered me. You think you've won? You'll never be able to enjoy that money. You'll always know it should have been ours. No, Bradley, I said quietly. I'll enjoy it by doing exactly what Thomas wanted, using it to help others. The hospice center I'm building will have his name on it. His legacy will be about love and care, not greed and entitlement. He was our father. Yes, I agreed. And he loved you. But you didn't love him back. You loved his money. There's a difference. 6 months later, the Thomas Mitchell Hospice Center broke ground. I used half the inheritance for the building and set up a foundation with the rest to keep it running. Thomas's room from our home was recreated as a memorial space where families could find peace during difficult times. At the groundbreaking, something unexpected happened. Chloe showed up. I know I'm not welcome, she said, tears genuine this time. But I wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not for the money. For the years. For the time I wasted being angry that Dad found happiness. For not seeing who you really were. I studied her. What changed? I have a daughter now. And I realized, if something happened to me, I'd want someone to love her the way you loved Dad. Unconditionally. Even when his kids were horrible. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. The hospice center opened a year later. Above the entrance, Thomas's favorite quote, "Love isn't measured in dollars, but in moments of grace." Bradley and Miranda never came around. They fled the state after the fraud charges were filed. But sometimes, late at night, I'll get a call from Chloe. She volunteers at the center now, learning what her father saw in the work I do. He talked about you all the time during his treatments, she told me recently. Not about the money or the business. Just about how you made him laugh. How you made him feel young again. How you gave him a reason to fight. He gave me the same, I admitted. The lawyer, James Pemberton, became a trusted friend. He told me later that in all his years of practice, he'd never seen someone plan so carefully for their spouse's protection. Thomas knew exactly what would happen, James said. He planned every detail to ensure you were protected, not just financially but emotionally. He wanted you to see their true colors so you'd never feel guilty about the inheritance. I kept the letter Thomas wrote me. On hard days, when the loneliness creeps in, I read it. I remember his laugh, his terrible dad jokes, his gentle hands. I remember how he looked at me like I hung the moon, even when I was covered in other patients' bodily fluids after a long shift. The money never mattered. It still doesn't. What matters is that Thomas saw me, really saw me, just as I saw him. Not as a wealthy businessman or a dying patient, but as a man worthy of love and dignity in his final years. His children locked me out of a conference room. But Thomas had already given me the key to everything that mattered. And that's a door no amount of anger, greed, or resentment could ever close.